we keep in touch. And it's worked very well, actually, with the spot system, which Tony will talk about, I'm sure you're all familiar with, every 6 hours. So at least then, I know that he's still alive. And the danger with that is, though, if it doesn't come through...
You make regular position reports. And then a corollary to that is that if you're going to make regular position reports, should the communication be two-way? Should Shaw be able to contact you? So those are the sort of things I want to discuss very quickly now. But I think before going on much further, it'd be useful to find out what Blondie Hasler thought about it. Well, his view was very much, he was dead against wireless transmitters. He thought, this is when he was proposing to the Royal Western Yacht Club, the Ostar, he thought that an entrant could send distress signals and cause a lot of trouble. And also, he thought it more seemly for the entrant to drown like a gentleman rather than call for help by radio. Another decision to make is whether it ought to be a manual release, in other words, you'll pick it up out of your locker and take it with you into your life raft or whatever, or do you have some sort of automatic release system that if you have a collision, for example, or you have to abandon the boat too quickly, the thing will automatically deploy?
I owned this parachute sea anchor, and I bought it with the theory that if I ever run into these sort of problems, I could deploy it. But I'd never actually deployed it before. I'd never been able to practice with it because when you're outside Falmouth Harbour with a parachute at 200 foot of line, it does get in the way of other boats and other vessels and things like that. So I had it stowed, and mentally I'd rehearsed what to do with it, but I'd never actually used it in anger. 32 days into the voyage coming back, I was about 400 miles offshore. And what had happened is that it had been a very difficult, frustrating voyage because I was expecting all sorts of favourable winds and tailwinds, as you'd expect coming from west to east. But I wasn't getting that, and in fact what I was getting was some pretty strong gales and big seas and what have you that were causing me to heave to, and they were all easterly, so I was in the wrong end of some anticyclonic type of depression that kept sweeping through, you know. Everything was all balanced. What I found of the yacht, because the centre of effort is slightly forward with the mast, and you've got the roller furler and all that at the front, you're going to get a bit of this sort of thing going on, and it just makes it a bit sickly being on the boat. But when I came back into the cockpit, I mean, the difference had to be seen to be believed. The boat felt safe, comfortable, the waves were coming on, the wind and the waves were no less furious, but the bows just spliced everything, and I felt it was a completely different scenario to what I'd been in just, you know, half an hour earlier.
When the storm abated, is there like a trip line or anything you could actually bring it in with, or do you just...
Yeah, I thought about that. I don't like the idea of trip lines. I understand why they're important, but to me it's just something that's going to get wrapped around and coiled around, and I don't like the idea of any piece of rope going under my boat and maybe catching on with propellers and rudders and things like that. And I'm not fond of devices that hang off the back of boats.
Just
now,
forward and plug it in manually.
I've got one friend who swears by these Jordan series drogues, and Roger Taylor swears by Jordan series drogues, and that's great. I understand all the very good reasons for that. But I also know of a man who had his steering gear ripped off in the South Atlantic because, you know, a misplaced rope got around the wrong part, and the strain was just so enormous, bang, it was gone, you know. And so I just think that the front of the boat is the weather end business, and that's where your safest bet is.
But on my way back, I was about 4 days out from Ponta Delgado and about 400 miles off Portugal, and a gale came up behind me, and it was quite slow moving. There were big seas, and when it passed through and the waves start, instead of following behind you, they come in at right angles. I was going too fast, and the boat literally fell into a hole in the ground, and the front portions of 2 of the pontoons broke off. This was at night. I knew there'd been some damage, but I couldn't see anything. And in the morning, when it was light enough to see on deck, it was clear that I wasn't going to go anywhere, and I certainly wasn't going to follow the principle of Blondie Hasler's one of drowning like a gentleman. So I let off my EPIRB. That was at about 6 o'clock in the morning, And by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my radio kind of crackled into life, and I got the message, Tahiti Bell, this is Omega Princess, what's your position? Over. So I was able to give him my position, and they told me they would be with me in about an hour's time. During that interval we were talking, updating the position all the time, and then it crackled into life again, and they said, we've got you visual, and this great big oil tanker was sort of coming towards me. It was like a submarine, and the spray and the water breaking over the decks. It was an incredible sight. And it's amazing really, because you think you're going to die, and you press this little button and nothing happens for hours, and then all of a sudden everything's been going on while you don't know about it with Falmouth Coast Guard, and I think the message goes to America, and then they track your closest ships to you, and they then task 2 ships to come, and there she was. So they came alongside, they made a lee, they made 2 passes actually, and so I was in the lee. The captain handled this boat as though it was a dinghy. It was an extraordinary piece of seamanship. They then came alongside. I didn't actually touch the hull. They threw lines down to me. I was able to communicate with the VHF radio all the time and talk to them. Threw lines down to me. I connected onto my life jacket, jumped over the side. They pulled me over to them. I couldn't climb up the pilot ladder. They put the pilot ladder down, but I was tired and very cold and full of water. My oilskins were really heavy. So in the end, they just pulled me up, like on a crane. So there are some lessons to be learned from this, which may... I've been rescued, by the way, twice by the lifeboat and once by the...
Sheaves something that are really essential on a boat. So check your masthead sheaves, check we had it leave, all these things, and lubricate them. Make sure they're not worn, and lubricate them well, so that makes life easy. This is a keel step mast, and there's lots of corrosion going on here. It's where the mast goes through the mast partners, and it's flaking away nicely. So again, if you've got a keel step mast, it's well worth having a look at the area that's hidden under the mast partners, because that might be somewhere that's giving problems. The other thing is all the attachment points on the mast. The sort of serious bits are gooseneck and where the kicker strap comes down. You get a lot of strain on the bottom of the kicker. This is a very familiar gooseneck fitting to me. It's worn out. You'll see that the alloy casting bit in the middle has worn because it's a stainless steel pin with alloy casting. It's been fizzing away nicely, and you'll see the whole thing is leaning back slightly, so that will be changed fairly shortly.
There are basically 3 main routes to consider across the Atlantic. They are the very, 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 very long route, the very, very long route, and the very long route. But they also break down as being the relatively easy route, the very hard route, and the very, very hard route. So you place your money, you take your choice. To get rid of the very, very, very long route is basically the Columbus route. So you leave the English Channel down across the bay, Portugal, Canaries, Cape Verdes, across to Trinidad, up through the Caribbean, up goes Florida, and you'll get to America. I'll come back to the pros and cons in a moment. The one that a lot of Jesters seem to favour is the rum line, which is the very, very long route, which basically means you leave the channel and you steer whatever it is, 255, 260-ish, whatever, and you try and hold it all the way across. But on a Mercator's chart like that, it looks like the obvious sensible way to go. When you go onto a mnemonic chart, which this is, which does great circles, then you can see that actually coming way down here and back up again, as it were, is longer than the great circle. If my beautiful assistant would just come and give me a hand a moment. You just stand just there and hold that at about that angle for a moment. Right, this is obviously a globe. Here's the UK, there's America roughly. If I pull that across there, it's elastic, so you can see that's roughly a straight line, and if you were to slice through it, you'd end up with 2 equal hemispheres. If you just roll it up, kids, so the pins on the thing. But when you do that, you can see how it seems to go up to the north and back down again. And basically, Great Circle Route is doing that. So thank you very much. Well done. So the Great Circle Route then actually goes up towards the north and comes down again. The problem you can see with this, as I've put it on here, it goes through 2 lumps of land over here. So you have to do a modified Great Circle, and you sail to a point somewhere over off St John's here, and then you work your way down the coast. Pros and cons. The first problem with the Caribbean route is that you're going at the wrong time of the year. By the time you get down towards the Cape Verdes, it's probably end of June, July, something like that, and you're right in the hurricane season. Crossing this part of the Atlantic in the hurricane season is stupid, to say the least, and even in a small boat's even more silly. So if you were going to go that way, then you probably dawdle your way down here, probably Corunna, Vigo, Porto, Lisbon, maybe have a look at Gibraltar, Tangiers, might as well look at Africa while you're here, mightn't you? Out to the Canaries, have a sail around, into the Senegal, have a look in the Gambia, look at the hippopotamuses and things, out to the Cape Verdes, and then about beginning of December you whip across here, then you work your way up through the Caribbean. There's no point in rushing because you don't want to be coming up here in March and February when it's cold, so you might as well dawdle your way up there. So eventually you get there about the following May, with a beautiful tan, your boat in great shape, all your supplies all filled up, and some great stories to tell of all the places you've been. That's the way I'd go anyway. This one's sort of favoured by Jesters. I think it has several advantages. You tend to stay a bit further south, so it's a little bit warmer a lot of the time. The Azores aren't too far away if you have a problem, and I know Dennis and Duncan will talk about that, or have done and whatever, so there's a bolt hole if you need it part way. But a disadvantage tends to come that these hurricanes that come across here eventually recurve, and they go off in a north-northeasterly direction or northeast or whatever, and it depends how far across they get before they recurve, where they just come up the east coast of the United States or come up much further up the middle, or even quite close to the Azores.
And as for Ewan, I mean, what can you say about Ewan? Then probably there's no one else that we can probably think of that's done so much to promote single-handed sailing. And probably the thing that a lot of us novices don't get or don't see is how much criticism and flack he's taken along the way, particularly in the early days. And I like to think that sort of lessened over recent years, and I think we've all played our small part in that, in terms of preparing our boats and making good seaman-like decisions. But I think it's fair to say that if it wasn't for Ewan and his passion and commitment for the Jester Challenge, not only would we wouldn't be here tonight, but there's a lot of us who probably wouldn't have achieved what we have done in terms of sailing terms. So I don't know who's going to be speaking to Ewan next, but please pass on that sentiment from the Jester Challengers and our congratulations.